All right. Hey, y'all. Kyle here. Quick video on putting together our very first local render using pseudorandom for Rhino. That is to say, a rendering which is completed using a locally installed Comfy UI server without relying on cloud services whatsoever. So by the end of the tutorial, we should be working between Rhino and a local instance of Comfy UI, and we should be making renderings on our own computer. We'll proceed in a couple of parts. The first part, we will complete what's called a local endpoint render, meaning that we start here in Rhino and we send off a render to be completed in Comfy UI in the background, and then it gets returned here to Rhino without us really doing anything at all in Comfy UI. And the second part, we'll do a different kind of approach called a package export render from Comfy UI. And there we'll be working more in Comfy UI, but passing in information from a scene and a set of materials and prompts from Rhino that get rendered out from us working within the Comfy UI environment. So those two parts. Before we begin, it's important to make sure that we're ready. So before starting this tutorial, you should make sure you've completed all the previous steps. Specifically, we would assume before you watch this tutorial that you have, number one, installed pseudorandom for Rhino and registered your license. There's a previous video about that. If you wanted to verify that this is the case, you could come here to Rhino and try invoking a command that starts with pseudorandom, such as pseudorandom show toolbar. And you should also have the UI set up. So you should see these things that I'm seeing on the right regarding the pseudorandom for Rhino plugin interface. You should also make sure that you have Comfy UI for desktop installed as per my previous instructions, and also configure this as a local endpoint. So what does it mean to configure Comfy UI as a local endpoint? Well, you're going to need a couple of custom node packages, as I've described in a previous video. You'll have to set up a custom model path with some essential models downloaded and installed. You should configure Comfy UI to act as a local server by setting up host and port settings. And if you wanted to verify all of this is running well, if you have Comfy UI open and running as I do, and you go to this URL or something similar, depending on how your port settings have been set, you should see something like this, which is a description of what we call the affordances of the endpoint, all the things that it can do. So it might not look exactly like mine, it might look a bit different, but you should see something at that URL. All right, so if you've got all of that set up, then you're ready to go, and let's get started. Okay, so starting off here in Rhino, the first thing we're going to want to do is set the scene. That is to say, before rendering, we have to describe what we want to see through modeling some geometry or applying some information to geometry we already have, and configuring things in such a way that we're able to do our rendering. So pseudorandom uses two sorts of what we call prompts to guide the generation of images. Environmental prompts and then semantic material prompts. So we'll look at these one at a time. So starting with the environmental prompts. So the environmental prompts are kind of a high-level text description that shape the aesthetic and narrative and the overall kind of look and feel of the rendering. There's three kinds of environmental prompts, none of which are related to objects in the scene. They'd rather kind of describe the scene overall. So those three types are scene prompts, style prompts, and negative prompts. All of those are found here in the pseudo materials panel of the pseudorandom for Rhino plugin. So let's go through these one at a time. Each of these are used differently by different rendering workflows, but ultimately they're interpreted by the whatever kind of language or image model that we're working with to generate the final image. So to set these prompts, we simply go to the pseudo's material panel and we type in what we want to see. So for the scene prompt, I would say something like objects on a white background, for example. So I'm describing the kind of scene overall without describing the nature of objects within it. The style, this would depend on the kind of style of image we want to get out. So if you wanted something which was highly stylized, like a watercolor or an ink some kind of print, then you would say that here. If you wanted it to be kind of photorealistic, you could describe that here as well. I'm going to go with product photography professional photo shade or something like that. And then finally, the negative prompt is things we do not want to see in the image. So this is kind of like an anti-prompt. So you could say something like, messy, low res, watermarks, things like that typically go in the negative prompt. So typically these are longer, but like this is fine for now. So I'll go ahead and click apply changes, and that locks them in. And so anytime I render, these environmental prompts are going to come with me. So those are the environmental prompts. When it comes to the semantic material prompts, these are not set in the scene overall, which is typically how things are done in a kind of generative AI environment, but rather are assigned object by object. And this is really something that's special about the pseudorandom approach. So what this means is we have to have objects in our scene to be able to prompt on. So let's go ahead and make a couple of just very simple objects like so. And then you'll see here in the pseudo materials panel, if I select an object like that, then the panel changes. If I deselect, then it changes back, right? If I select more than one object, it changes in a different way. So let's go back and select one object, and you see that there's no prompts assigned to either one of these objects. So if I wanted to assign a kind of semantic material to one of these objects, then I can do so. I can say assign this object to a new prompt. So when I do that, there we go. I get this dialog. So I could say something like, I don't know, an iron box and save that. And when I do that, you see I get a new sort of UI element over here that says an iron box. If I deselect the object, I get the single prompt in iron box as one of the possible prompts that's available in my model that could be assigned to other objects as well. So if I were to select the other object, for example, the interface would change again, and I would have the ability to assign an iron box prompt to this object as well. Or I could click here on assign the object to a new prompt, and the same dialog appears, and I could say something like, oh, I don't know, a glass box, and click save. And now I've got two prompts in my model, an iron box and a glass box. So if I ever made a new object or had other things in my scene that I wanted to assign to, I could create that and then select from one of those two existing prompts, let's say a glass box, and click on that. And now I've got this object, which has been assigned the prompt a glass box, as well as this one, whereas this is an iron box. And so it goes. So prompts are thought of as something like a material which can be assigned or associated with objects in the 3D model in an environment like this. So this is how semantic materials work in pseudorandom. So with that in mind, I'm actually going to switch to a different 3D model. Let me just fix this up a little bit. Here we go. So this is, as you can see, a different geometric model. I've got different sorts of prompts in here. Let's just take a quick tour. There we go. So this is a gray cardboard box, and this is a very cute cat, and this is a crystal ball, and this is a ball of twine. So I'll arrange things here so we can move forward. But this is just kind of like a good starting point for the rest of the video. So with that, let's move on. Okay, so with our geometry and our prompt setup, we can dive right in and do our first local endpoint render. So a local endpoint render is different than the other kind that we're going to be doing in that we stay here in Rhino, right? So in a local endpoint render, Comfy UI is running in the background, but it might as well not be there from a kind of user experience. And we're going to stay here in Rhino. We're going to compose our scene. We're going to set our prompts as we already done. We're going to render things out. The plugin is going to send a package of information to the backend running kind of silently behind the scenes. It's going to do the calculation for the render and then send it back here to Rhino, and then we'll be able to see it. So it's one of the kind of like easiest ways to kind of straightforward way to do a rendering. So In this first section, we're going to do a few things to help us understand that. We're going to walk through setting the output. We're going to walk through configuring the endpoint first, setting the local endpoint. Then we're going to talk about configuring the output folder. Very simple. Then we're going to talk about how workflows work into this and what a workflow is. And then we'll do a render and see the result. So before we get started here, in Rhino, I'm just going to move things around here a bit. You see I have Comfy UI running in the background. So let's just kind of get a peek at that from behind. And I'm going to open this bottom panel, and you see I'm going to open up the logs so we can see things happening as they happen as we're kind of working here in Rhino. So sort of something peeking out from behind the corner there. Right, so that looks good. So the first thing I'd like to talk to is just how to set the endpoint to produce a local render. So to set the endpoint, we use this panel, the pseudo configuration panel in pseudorandom. And you see at the top of this, we have a endpoint configuration called endpoint. And right now it's not set as we want. So we'll change that to local server. And when I change that, you see that there's it's already talking to the local server, and it's determined that the server connection is indeed healthy. If I click ping, then it like talks to it again, talks to it again, talks to it again. It's like, hey, are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? And yes, it's getting a signal back that things are ready. So this means, so that healthy signal means that we're connecting to the server on the right port, and the server is up and running. So that's what we want to see. That's great to see. Awesome. So with that set up, I'd actually like to move us on to discussing the output folder. So a couple of things to understand, and let's open up a couple of locations here. Oh, that's giving away the store. So there are, as you know, from setting up Comfy UI as an endpoint, Comfy UI has its own output folder. And that typically lives somewhere that you can configure. And in a previous video, we set a custom location for this. And for me, that's in this location, Y or X / Comfy UI / output. So any images that I make in Comfy UI, the interface, end up being sent here. Pseudorandom has its own output folder. So Comfy UI does the rendering. Sometimes it actually puts it here as well. But then Pseudorandom gobbles it up and puts it in and embeds other kinds of information in it, which will be the subject of another video, and then puts it into another folder, which is the pseudorandom output folder. So for me, that's right now here in my documents folder / pseudorandom / output. Going back to Rhino, you can see that you're able to configure that through this interface down here at the bottom, the pseudo render panel. So if you want to change that file location, you can just click this little yellow folder button, and then you can change the result directory right here. So I'll just cancel out of that. All right, so all of our renderings are going to be set up, going to be sent there. Put things back the way we want them. Very good. So one last thing, which is the workflow. So we've set the endpoint, which is like where the rendering is going to be calculated. The workflow is equally important, and it describes the way in which the rendering is going to proceed, right? So think of like the endpoint as the kitchen and the workflow as the recipe, or something like this. A workflow in pseudorandom is analogous to a workflow in Comfy UI. Remember that a workflow in Comfy UI is like what we see here. It's a set of nodes and connections which describes the process by which renderings are produced or images are produced. The workflow in pseudorandom is exactly the same thing. Actually, a workflow in pseudorandom contains a Comfy UI workflow, but it also contains other information, such as the kind of metadata that drives the way in which the rendering is going to go. And also we sprinkle in some spatial information about your 3D model and that kind of thing. So to set the workflow for any given render, you go back here to the pseudo configuration panel, and just below the endpoint, you can choose the workflow. And you probably saw I already had one selected here, Juggernaut-text. So we'll use that one again. This is a nice one. It's not the most high quality rendering, but it's very fast, which is why I'm using it here. Workflows contain variables that can be set here in the Rhino interface. So you see there's two such variables here, steps and control net strength. I won't explain those. I'll leave that to another video. But just suffice to say, you can kind of guide the way in which the workflow produces an image by configuring those variables. So we'll just say that's enough, and the workflow is now configured. At this point, we are able finally to make a rendering, right? So we've got our endpoint set up, we've got our output folder set up, we've got our workflow set up, we have geometry, we've got prompts, etc., etc. We're going to click the render button, and as I do, click, we'll see some changes here in the Comfy UI interface and some other changes, oh, almost missed them, down there in the Comfy UI logs. And oh, over there in the render result folder, we saw an image pop in. All of that happened very quickly. We'll do it again. But just to say, if I click on this, oh dear, that's too big. I hope you can see that image. There's an image of our very cute cat. We'll look at that another way. Here, we'll go to the output folder and look at it this way because this is better. There we go. So that's the resulting image. Very cute. Let's do that again and just change the point of view a little bit. We'll get a frontal view and maybe zoom in a little bit. Okay, so I'll click render again, and you'll see the pseudo-random interface starts spinning its wheels. Oh, back in the background, Comfy UI was doing its thing. Now we got a result. Let's look at that. Okay, so you can see the kind of flow here. I'll do this one more time from the side. Pull Comfy UI up and click render again, just so we can see all the wheels turning and the percentages happening. And there we go. So there it is. We've now produced our first, actually 3 renderings in quick succession using a local endpoint of Comfy UI directly from Rhino. Congratulations, you've made your first render. Let's move on. All right, one last thing today, which is to demonstrate an alternative approach to making renderings between these two pieces of software we call the package export approach. So package export is different than the local endpoint style or approach of rendering in that while the local endpoint style kind of more or less stays in Rhino. We could just stay in Rhino if we wanted to. We didn't have to look at Comfy UI at all. And gathers up all the information from a 3D model, including the prompts and the spatiality and blah, 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 sends it off to Comfy UI, which is doing its work in the background, and then waits for a response. The package export is different. The package export only does half of that round trip. So instead of doing a call and response, it just does the call, right? It just sends a package of information from the 3D model, including all the prompts, spatiality, and blah, 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 to basically a place that Comfy UI can see it, and then does nothing else. It just stops right there. And then it's up to us to go into Comfy UI and finish the job using a set of custom nodes that have been developed for this purpose. Now, why would you want to do such a thing? Well, you've seen that here in Rhino, the pseudo-random plugin provides a number of workflows to choose from. Right now, I think there's like 5 or 6. But you have to choose one of those 5 or 6. So if you want to deviate from those presets, those predetermined workflows, and do your own thing or develop your own workflow, then you wouldn't be able to do that from the Rhino interface. You would have to dip into Comfy UI. So the package export system is really designed for that kind of like power user use case, where you want to develop something really special that the community that's put together these workflows as being the kind of built-in workflows in pseudo-random, the community hasn't yet thought of, right? Or maybe it's a way for you as a community member to develop your own workflow. Okay, so let's see that in action. And to do so, I need to tell you about one special directory location, which is this one, the model snapshots location. So that by default, I believe in pseudo-random is here. It's your documents folder /pseudo-random/ underbar model snapshots. It's similar to the output, the default output location. This is the location that pseudo-random's package exporter by default, I believe, will export this thing called a spatial package or a model snapshot, whatever we want to call it. And that's the package of information that contains all of that stuff that I described that can become the basis of a rendering in Comfy UI. So let's see that in action. So there's the folder location. If we go back here to Rhino, it's very simple. We go here to the sudo configuration panel. We change our endpoint from local server to package export. And you see that the workflow is still being presented here, but it actually doesn't matter because a workflow does not come along with the package export, right? The workflow uses the package. The package export just sends off the package, and then the workflow would happen in Comfy UI. So we can ignore the workflow part of this panel. And all we have to do is click render, and the package is exported. And so there it is in this folder location. That's a JSON file. You can open that up and look at it if you want to. But what you really want to do is come back over here to Comfy UI and then open a workflow in Comfy UI, such as what I have open here, that gobbles up that JSON file and then uses it in some way. So I won't go into the details of how these nodes work or what they all do. I'll leave that to another video. But suffice to say, this node loads that JSON file from the folder, and you can see that this folder location is set to my the pseudorandom model snapshots folder, and it gobbles up the most recent JSON file there, and then uses it in some crazy way to make something like an image. So let's go ahead and run that. And you can see that there's parts of the image that are probably familiar. There's a depth map of the Rhino model that we have open. These are all the masks relating to each of the image, the image prompts, the semantic material prompts that we talked about. And there's it's already done. There's the resulting image. But because we're here in Comfy, we can now mess with this in ways that we would not be able to from the Rhino side. So for example, if we wanted to change here, the control net strength, this is how much to follow the geometry of the model. If we lower that radically, 0.25, and then render again, we'll probably get an image which does not follow the geometry of the model at all, or not. Oh, well, actually, that's pretty good. Let's change it even lower, 0.1. We'll probably get something which begins to look like something quite different than the three-dimensional geometry of the model. Well, it's hard to see. We'll make that 0.01, and then hopefully we'll get things that are a little even more different than our 3D model. Okay. There we go. That's a bit more different. You can expect things even wilder, of course, if you change these settings in different ways. And you can begin to understand the kind of power of working in this way. Just to kind of reiterate that, I'll come back here and change the point of view in my Rhino model. I'll render again. Again, that just exports the package. It doesn't actually make a rendering. And then I'll run this again with that new package, and then we'll see the change here in Comfy. So if you prefer to work mainly in Comfy, then the package export process is for you. If you prefer to stay in Rhino, then the local endpoint is the method for you. All right. So with that, I gotta call this a success. We've made our first renderings here in Comfy UI and in Rhino based on the spatial information in a 3D model, based on prompts that we've assigned to that model. And we've done so two ways. We've done so through a local endpoint method that keeps us mainly in the Rhino software. And we've also learned how to do that through a package export method, which allows us to work in deeper ways over in Comfy UI. All right. Thanks for watching.